Have you been framed for murder before? I never thought I'd hear the words, "You're under arrest for murder," directed at me. Murder? Me? The accusation echoed in my head like a bad dream, but the cold steel of the handcuffs biting into my wrists made it painfully real. The day had started normally. I woke up, dragged myself out of bed, made a cup of instant coffee, and scrolled through messages on my phone. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just the same routine. But by nightfall, I was sitting in a dimly lit interrogation room trying to convince two detectives that I wasn't a killer. The victim was Daniel, a man I knew, but barely. We'd worked together on a few freelance jobs. He was more of an acquaintance than a friend. We exchanged the occasional email, sometimes grabbed a drink after a long day, but that was the extent of it. So when the police said my fingerprints were all over his apartment, my jaw nearly hit the floor. "Explain this," one detective demanded, slapping a photo onto the metal table. It showed a bloody knife, apparently the murder weapon. According to them, it had my prints too. "I've never seen that in my life," I stammered. "I don't even own knives like that." They didn't believe me. To them, it was simple. Prints on the weapon, my presence at the scene, and a motive they manufactured out of thin air, an alleged financial dispute with Daniel. The problem was, I had no way of proving otherwise. The truth was, I had been at Daniel's place about a week earlier. He'd asked me to help with a computer issue. I used his kitchen to wash my hands and grabbed a glass of water. That must have been how my prints ended up around. But the knife? No chance. Someone had to have planted it, but how do you prove something like that? In the cell that night, everything felt unreal. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with despair and stale sweat. I kept replaying the past few days in my mind, searching for details I might have overlooked. Who would want to frame me? Why me of all people? Then it clicked. Last week, I noticed Daniel had been acting strange. He kept checking his phone, nervously looking over his shoulder when we were out. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia, maybe stress. But what if he was involved in something deeper? Maybe he had enemies. Maybe one of them decided I'd be the perfect scapegoat. The next morning, they brought me back into questioning. I tried to explain. Daniel was into something, I could tell. Look at his calls, his texts, someone else wanted him gone. I didn't. But desperation doesn't sound convincing. To them, I was just trying to deflect blame. Days dragged on. My name splashed across the local news. Suspect arrested for brutal murder. Neighbours avoided eye contact. Friends stopped replying to messages. It was as though the world had already judged me guilty. My lawyer, a tired man with greying hair, told me I had to stay calm. The prosecution's case isn't airtight, he said, flipping through the file. But they've got enough circumstantial evidence to sway a jury if we don't find something better. Something better. That became my obsession. From the cell, I replayed every detail of my time with Daniel. His nervous glances. The locked drawer in his desk. A phone call he cut short when I entered the room. Could the answer be there? Eventually, my lawyer managed to subpoena Daniel's phone records. That's when everything cracked open. Dozens of messages from an unknown number surfaced. Threats, blackmail, demands for money, and then the breakthrough. Surveillance footage from a nearby street camera. It showed a hooded figure entering Daniel's apartment the night he was killed. Not me. Someone else. The evidence shifted the spotlight. The prosecution had to admit their case was built on sand. The charges were dropped. I walked out of court a free man, but not the same man who had walked in weeks earlier. Because here's the thing. Once you've been framed for murder, even if you're proven innocent, the shadow lingers. People still look at me differently, like they're wondering if maybe, just maybe, I got away with something. Jobs don't call back. Friends remain distant. I didn't kill Daniel, but whoever set me up, they killed my old life. And that's a kind of murder too. Story 2. I swear I didn't kill him. That's the sentence I keep whispering under my breath, even now, as the walls of this cell seem to press closer every hour. They think I did it. Hell, the evidence screams I did it. But I know someone is setting me up. The problem is, nobody believes me, not even my own lawyer. He gives me that tired look like he's heard every excuse in the book before. But this isn't some excuse. This is my life unravelling. and I can feel the noose tightening around my neck with every passing second. If I can't prove my innocence soon, I'll be buried alive under a crime I never committed. What scares me most isn't the sentence itself, it's the thought that the real killer is still out there laughing at me. And then it hit me. What if they're not done yet? And the police kept repeating the same points. My fingerprints on the knife, my DNA on the glass, my presence at the victim's apartment 2 nights before. They made it sound like an open and shut case. But I kept asking myself, how did my prints get on the knife? I've never touched it, I've never even seen it, so someone must have planted it. The thought chills me, because that means whoever set me up knows me, knows my habits, knows just how to weave the perfect trap. It couldn't have been random. I rack my brain, thinking of everyone I know, friends, co-workers, even family. Each face comes with doubts. Each smile suddenly feels like it could be a mask. That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. Someone had been inside my apartment recently. I remembered the night after I visited Daniel, he was the victim, that I'd come home to find the window slightly open. At the time, I dismissed it, thinking maybe I'd forgotten to lock it, but now I'm not so sure. What if someone slipped in, grabbed something of mine, and used it to frame me? The idea makes my stomach turn. That means this was premeditated, not some spur-of-the-moment setup. Which begs the bigger question, why me? I wasn't close to Daniel, just a work acquaintance. If someone wanted him dead, why drag me into it? The more I think about it, the more one name keeps echoing in my mind. A person I'd hoped I'd never have to suspect. But before I can say it aloud, the cell door clanged open. They pulled me back into interrogation, the detectives with their stony faces and clipped voices. This time, they laid down photos across the table, grainy security footage of me entering Daniel's building on the night of the murder. My chest tightened. I wasn't there, I was at home. Yet the figure in the picture looked eerily like me. Same build, same jacket, same stride. Care to explain this? One detective asked, leaning forward. My tongue felt like sandpaper in my mouth. If I told them it wasn't me, I'd sound delusional. If I admitted it was, I'd be signing my own death warrant. I did the only thing I could. I stared at the photo, tracing every pixel, and then I saw it. The man in the picture was wearing my jacket, but it wasn't mine. A subtle tear on the sleeve proved it. I'd thrown that jacket out months ago. Someone had dug it out, maybe from the trash, maybe from a donation bin, and used it to impersonate me. My heart hammered in my chest as I pointed it out to the detectives, but they barely glanced at it. To them, it was another desperate attempt to squirm out of the inevitable. "We'll let the jury decide," one of them said coldly, gathering the photos. I felt the walls closing in again, but this time anger bubbled up with my fear. Whoever was doing this wanted me to break, to crumble. But I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I'd fight back, even if it killed me, and maybe it would. Nights in the cell grew longer, my thoughts racing in circles. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just kept replaying the events like a broken tape. Then, in a moment of restless clarity, I remembered Daniel's last words to me. He had looked over his shoulder, lowered his voice, and said, "If anything happens to me, don't trust." But then his phone rang, cutting him off. I'd brushed it aside then, but now it gnawed at me. Don't trust who? The police? A mutual friend? Someone closer? That unfinished sentence might have been the key to everything, and I'd been too blind to see it. I slammed my fist against the cell wall, cursing myself for not pressing him further. And that's when I heard it. A whisper, soft, almost inaudible, drifting from the adjacent cell. At first I thought I was imagining it, sleep-deprived and paranoid. But then it came again, clearer this time. "You shouldn't have been there that night," the voice murmured. My heart leapt into my throat. I rushed to the bars, pressing my face against the cold metal, trying to glimpse the person in the darkness. "What did you say?" I hissed. Silence followed, stretching for what felt like forever. And then, just as I was about to give up, the voice returned. "You're not the only one they're after!" Story 3. I never thought my quiet life could twist into something straight out of a nightmare. One moment I was locking up the bookstore where I worked. The next I was staring at flashing red and blue lights outside my apartment. The neighbours had gathered, whispering in low, sharp voices, eyes darting toward me as if I'd suddenly grown horns. My stomach dropped when two officers approached and asked me to come with them. They wouldn't tell me why, only that I was a person of interest. I remember my hands trembling as I fumbled for my keys, dropping them twice before shoving them in my pocket. The walk to the cruiser felt like a funeral procession, each step heavier than the last. I wanted to ask what this was about, but my throat locked shut. And then, as the door slammed behind me, I caught the words, "She's the suspect." At the station, everything unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. They said a man had been murdered in the alley behind my apartment building, stabbed, left to bleed out on the pavement. My mind reeled. When had this happened? I hadn't heard a sound, hadn't seen a thing. But then the detective laid out the evidence with grim precision. My fingerprints on the victim's wallet, my scarf found near the body, and a witness who swore they saw me fleeing the scene. I almost laughed, the absurdity of it hitting me like a cruel joke. But nobody else was laughing. The room felt like it was caving in, walls pressing against me, suffocating me. My pulse roared in my ears as I thought, someone wants me gone. And they're succeeding. The victim's name was Caleb. I knew him vaguely, a tenant in the same building. We'd exchanged polite nods in the hallway, nothing more. Yet here I was, accused of his murder, as if my mere proximity had sealed my fate. They showed me the wallet, asked me to explain how my fingerprints got there. I couldn't. I had never touched that man's things in my life. The scarf, though, it was mine. Or rather, it had been. I'd lost it weeks ago, thought I'd dropped it on the bus. Now it had turned up beside a corpse, damning me with its silent accusation. My chest tightened as realization sank in. Someone had been watching me, collecting pieces of my life to stitch together this perfect trap. And the worst part? I had no clue who. Sleep became impossible. Back in the holding cell, I lay awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. My mind replayed the last few weeks like a broken projector. Had I seen anyone suspicious near my door? Had anyone followed me from work? The more I thought, the more paranoia seeped in, coiling around me like a snake. Every memory became suspicious. Every glance from a stranger turned sinister in hindsight. I kept circling back to one night, a shadow outside my window, gone in an instant when I flicked on the light. I had dismissed it then. Now it haunted me. What if they'd been planning this all along? What if I'd already lost before I even knew I was playing the game? Then came the so-called witness. They brought her into the courtroom during the preliminary hearing, a young woman with sharp eyes and a steady voice, claiming she saw me running from the alley. I studied her face, searching for recognition, but she was a stranger. Her testimony was clear, confident, and damning. My lawyer leaned over, whispering that we could challenge her credibility later. But all I could think was, why is this woman lying? I wanted to scream across the room, to demand why she was doing this to me. But I sat still, nails digging into my palms, because anger would only make me look guilty. And then, just before she left the stand, she glanced at me and smiled. That smile froze my blood. It wasn't the smile of a stranger, it was the smile of someone who knew me, someone who enjoyed my suffering. I racked my brain, desperate to place her. Had she come into the bookstore? Had I brushed past her on the street? There was something disturbingly familiar in the curve of her lips, but I couldn't anchor it to a memory. My lawyer tried to reassure me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random. This woman had a reason for targeting me. And if she had gone this far, planting evidence, weaving lies, what else was she capable of? The thought gnawed at me until I could hardly breathe. And then the question hit me like a blade. What if she wasn't working alone? The days blurred together, a haze of hearings, whispered conversations with my lawyer, and sleepless nights filled with dread. But then a new piece of evidence surfaced, a grainy security camera feed from a shop across the street. It showed a figure in a long coat dropping something in the alley the night Caleb was killed. The resolution was poor, the face unrecognizable, but one detail caught my eye. The figure was wearing gloves. My gloves. The same pair I'd lost months ago, a gift from my sister. My heart lurched as I realized the depth of this nightmare. Whoever was framing me wasn't just using random items, they were using my life, piece by piece, to paint me as a murderer. And if they had all this, what else did they take from me that I hadn't even noticed yet? The case isn't over. I'm still fighting. still clawing for a sliver of truth to break through this web of lies. My lawyer says there's hope, that the jury might see the holes, that the camera footage might raise enough doubt. But I've started to notice things outside the courtroom. A car parked across from my apartment that never seems to leave. A man standing too long at the corner near the courthouse, eyes fixed on me. And last night a letter slipped under my door. No return address, just 6 chilling words scrawled in ink. You're only the first, not the last.